Hi, everybody. Thanks for joining us this evening. This is John. I am the event coordinator at Murder by the Book. And before I get started with our chat with Amanda Flower and Jennifer Ashley, I thought I would just do a quick catch up with everybody, let everybody know what's been going on with us at the bookstore. So we are doing in-store events again. For you historical fiction fans, we're super excited. Susan Aaliyah McNeil is going to be in the store on Thursday night talking about her new standalone Mother-Daughter Traitor Spy. We also have... Catherine St. John is going to be in store at the end of September. And we've got some good stuff coming up in October. And then in November, we've got Michael Connolly and Robert Crace are both going to be back. So definitely take a look at the website, murderbooks.com. That'll give you an idea of what we've got coming up in store and virtually. We are still doing both. While we are chatting this evening, if you have questions for Jennifer or Amanda, please post those either in the live chat on YouTube or the comments on Facebook, and we will leave time to get to those in a little bit. We've also got, we haven't quite figured out what we're going to do for Small Business Saturday yet, but Small Business Saturday is coming up in November. If you don't follow us on Instagram, where we're also Murder Books, we have been sharing some of our favorite fall reads as we try to manifest some cooler temperatures here in Texas, where it's still 90 degrees and fall does not seem to be coming. So send us happy fall vibes. Tonight, I'm super excited to have Amanda Flower and Jennifer Ashley with us. So I'm going to bring them out and get us started. I'm going to start with Amanda Flower. How are you tonight, Amanda?
Good. How are you?
I'm good. Thank you. Happy launch day.
Thank you. I can't believe this. I mean, this is my 45th novel, but this
Wow.
one is like the big one to me, other than my very first book. You know, that's, of course, a big deal. But yeah I'm excited.
So Amanda's newest book is Because I Could Not Stop for Death, which is the first in her Emily Dickinson series. Amanda Flower is the USA Today bestselling and Agatha Award-winning mystery author of over 40 novels, including the national best-selling Amish Candy Mystery Series, or Amish Candy Shop Mystery Series, the Magical Bookshop Mysteries, and written under the name Isabella Alan, the Amish Quilt Shop Mysteries. She is a former librarian, and she and her husband, a recording engineer, own a habitat farm and recording studio in Northeast Ohio. And we're also excited to be joined by Jennifer Ashley. How are you tonight, Jennifer?
Good.
Thanks so much for joining us.
Sure.
So Jennifer's most recent book under the name Jennifer Ashley is The Secrets of Bow Lane, which is number 6 in the Below Stairs mystery series. Jennifer is the New York Times and USA Today bestselling author of the Below Stairs mysteries, the Shifters Unbound paranormal mysteries, and the Mackenzies historical romances. She also writes a USA Today bestselling mystery series under the name Ashley Gardner. And you were telling us just before we went live that you have a new Ashley Gardner book that came out today. What was the name of that one?
It's called Murder in the Eternal City. It's a Regency mystery, but the Regency characters go to Rome for vacation.
Perfect. So as I was mentioning, if you guys who are out there watching us have questions tonight, please post those and we will get to them in a little bit. But we're going to start off real nice and easy. Amanda, can you tell us a little bit about the elevator pitch for this new book?
Yeah, so it was Sherlock Holmes and Watson, but with Emily Dickinson. So the story is about Emily Dickinson before she was a recluse, and she's solving a murder, but it's narrated by her maid, fictional maid, Willow Noble. So that's kind of where the idea came from. And the reason I did that was I don't think I could write in Emily Dickinson's grammar nor style.
And then Jennifer, your new book is number 6 in the series. But if people aren't familiar with the series, can you tell them a little bit about kind of who Kat is and what she's up to in the new book?
Yes. The series is called the Below Stairs Mysteries. I also call it the Kat Holloway Mysteries because Kat Holloway is a cook in Mayfair in London. And actually, this background is a house in Curzon Street. I tried to get Mount Street where Kat actually works, but my picture wouldn't load, so I used Curzon Street, but it's just around the corner. Anyway, she's a cook in a fine Mayfair mansion, and she gets involved in the first book. A maid is killed, and she feels really bad about that, and she tries to figure out who did it, and she starts getting involved in mysteries. And she has a bow or a boyfriend, I guess you could call him, called Daniel. And he is like, he's supposedly a man of all work who just kind of makes deliveries to the house and everything. But turns out he's just a little bit more than that. And he's kind of a master of disguise, and he works for, we're not quite sure who he works for, but it's, he's high up in there. So that's basically the premise of the series. And this book 6, Kat finds out a little bit more about her so-called husband. She actually she was married, she thought, but it turned out the guy had already been married to someone else and duped her. And she has a daughter by him so that she can't tell anyone about. So she starts finding out a little bit more about him and how he's dead, and what happened to him, and other intriguing things about her own past.
So one of the things I loved about both books that you guys both have in common, you both have characters who are servants, which is interesting in a historical mystery perspective, because by definition, their job limits kind of where they're able to go, how much they're able to actually spend time investigating. So we'll start with Amanda. Can you talk a little bit about the challenge of that?
Yeah, because in actuality, in 1855, an undermaid, like a second maid in a home, probably would be stuck in the kitchen or cleaning the bathrooms, and, she wouldn't be out and about. So I really had to get her to connect with Emily Dickinson early, so that Emily, because she is the first daughter of the house, is just like, you have to come with me. And Willa is torn with that, because like the head maid, which in the story is a real historical character, their maid, Margaret O'Brien, gets very irritated with that, because she's left behind doing all this work for, this giant home where like 6 people live in. And of course, back then, like just washing clothes was a full day, if not numerous days events. So she needed help. So I definitely had Emily just kind of pull her away, and then Emily kind of barters, like with Margaret. She's like, well, she'll just stay up late and, scrub the kitchen for you. So poor Willa, like, has to go solve a murder, and she still has to come back and clean, because they weren't going to let her get out of the work. So.
Yeah. And how about you, Jennifer? Because in the house, Kat has a little bit of a higher position, so it's a little easier for her to duck away. But can you talk about the challenges of that?
Sure. First, I just want to mention one thing I forgot. The series is set in 1880s London. Kat, in the servant class, the cooks, the housekeepers, and the butlers were like the top tier. So she has a little bit of leeway. And I also gave her, she has a daughter that her best friend from childhood, takes care of. She lives in their home, and they are raising her. So I had a thing where Kat said she will not take a job unless she gets 1 full day and 1 half day out a week. And because she uses those to go see her daughter. But of course she doesn't tell them that, but I've also made her rather a very, very good cook, and everybody wants to hire her. So she can say, okay, I want that 1 day and that half day, or no dice, I'm not living. And her other criteria is she must work in London. If the family moves, because families would often move to their summer homes in the country for, months and months. And she said, no, if you're leaving, I'm staying here, or I'm going to get another job. So I kind of made her have more bargaining power for those days out. But it is a challenge, because, she has to have more than 1.5 days to investigate. Plus, I also want her to see her daughter. So she's now kind of employing her assistant, who's now dating a constable that's on their street. She enlists her help. She has another one of the ladies of the house that she works in, Lady Cynthia. She's a spinster, and she likes to cross-dress. She likes to dress as a man. And she also goes out and talks to her friends and other houses and helps Kat. So I kind of give Kat a network of people that will help her. So when she's stuck in the kitchen, chopping the onions and making everything, because cooking was a lot of work. And, the stove, just things I learned about what cooks did is just like, I'm so glad I just had my nice little gas stove that will just cook.
Right.
So that's kind of what I did, is I, made her, very adamant about her days out, and also gave her people to help her out.
Yeah. And then, so Amanda, one of the things that you do throughout the book is you weave in through, like you said, you didn't want to try to write in Emily Dickinson's grammar or her voice, but you weave in these little bits and pieces of her poetry in her speech. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, I think it just felt natural for me, because I think as a writer myself, and I'm not a poet, like I'm really terrible at poetry. But I still murmur things under my breath. Like if I think of a good line, that sort of thing. Or if I let you be like, well, what if, mine is mostly like, well, what if the guy was stabbed, because I write mystery. But like, I think as a writer, and especially someone as intense as Emily, her brain is so preoccupied with words and putting them together. So she would be, even when she's talking to someone, about something else, if she was struck with a beautiful line, she'd murmur it. And I mean, they have so many little scraps of paper that she left behind, where she would write bits of poetry on the back of receipts from people that, dropped off milk or bread to the house, on napkins. Like that was kind of, and you just think about how many that she dropped and just were like lost, for all time, where she just had a little pencil she's scratching down. So that's just how I think that she would process words. And then I feel like, this is all conjecture on my part, but at night she would go into her room and formulate that poem, and she would be up at all hours. And her desk was like not much bigger than my laptop. It's crazy how tiny this desk was that she sat at. And they have it in the Harvard library, and then there's a replica in the museum.
And then Jennifer, on your end, as we mentioned, Kat is a cook and she is in charge of the kitchen, and she is able to delegate some of her duties. And, while it's not kind of the type of mystery where there are recipes in the back of it, her cooking and her recipes and stuff like that are still very much a part of her and her character and her job. And I think you do a really good job of balancing that. Can you talk a little bit about like how much cooking stuff you're able to like work in and where that balance is?
Yeah, it's difficult because I do want to give a real sense of her. She's really good at her job. She likes her job. And I try to give a sense of really the details of what that would encompass. And kind of, I like the smells, the tastes and everything. But on the other hand, you can do too much of that and bog down the book. So it's kind of a difficult line to walk in. I find that when I do my first draft, I probably don't put in enough of the cooking because I'm anxious to get on with the story. Mm-hmm. So I kind of just say, okay, she's making this recipe today. And she tells the undercook what they have to do. And then when I go back into my second draft, I usually put a little bit more details of the cooking, because people seem to really like that. And actually, when I first started this, I said to my editor, why don't we put like a recipe or two in the back? Mm-hmm. Because, people might be interested in what she's making. And I get these recipes out of old Victorian cookbooks. So, but the editors didn't want to do it. So I just said, I didn't really fight that too much. And doing recipes is hard because you have to test them and make sure people, now can make what they made back then.
Right.
It's okay. But yeah, it is kind of a fine line to walk. So, and hopefully I've kind of got the balance good.
Yeah, I love the conflict in this new one, Secrets of Bow Lane, where Kat is basically in this battle with the lady of the house who wants all of these like crazy exotic dishes that there's no way that Kat could make, and she has to figure out how to make them just even edible.
Yeah, that was fun. I just usually, every book I need her to make something new and something different, and then I thought, well, what if Mrs. Bywater says, my friend's came up with these weird recipes from France or whatever. And Kat's just like, oh my. Make my job harder, please.
And so, Amanda, how do you do with the recipes in your Cozy series? Do you do you also go back in and do a second pass and add more of those details, or are they in when you start?
Yeah, so my first draft of any book I call like a fast draft. So it's really like a skeleton in some ways. It's just trying to get all the clues in and trying to solve the murder. And then I go back and layer in. So that's when I would layer in the things about the recipes. But I would say too, like, because my candy shop books do have recipes in the back, and they're Amish recipes. It's not maybe quite as hard as converting like an 1880s recipe, but you know, they don't use a microwave that I would, use. So trying to convert that too to something that someone will actually want to try. Instead of the way maybe the Amish would make it, sometimes can be challenging. And also just overall making candy can be a little tricky. So I try to pick very, very easy candy, because anything that takes a candy thermometer is kind of out of my wheelhouse, because that's like a different level.
So a question from the crowd for Jennifer. They want to know, do you think that people can start with The Secret of Boleyn, or do you recommend that they go back and start with the first book in the series?
You could probably be okay if you start with Secret of Boleyn, because I try to make sure that, everybody knows who is who and what's going on. It probably would be maybe more satisfying if you started with the first one, which is called Death Below Stairs, because then you kind of work up to where, this one reveals a lot of Kat's background that there are questions about in the first book. So the first book might be best if you've never come to this series before, but actually anywhere you dive in, you could probably be okay.
Yeah. And as I was telling Jennifer before we went live, I've read the first one in the series and I loved it. And then I've read this newest one, and jumping in with the newest one, I didn't feel lost, but it definitely made me want to go back and read books 2 through 5. So they are sitting on my bookcase. And I'm ready to go for theirs. Also, a question for Amanda has just popped up. Are there any significant animals in the Emily Dickinson series, since you have lots of animals in the Amanda Flowers books?
Yeah, I appreciate the question, because I'm a big animal. I have a farm and I'm a big animal person. So Emily Dickinson, this is a true fact, had a Newfoundland huge dog, brown dog named Carlo, and she named him Carlo. She loved popular fiction, which I adore about her. And at the time when she was younger, Jane Eyre was considered popular fiction because it was out. It was a new book. So Carlo was the name of St. John's dog, the guy that she left and hung out with before she came back. So she named her dog after a character in a book, which is, so literary, intertwined that I just adore that. There's also cats. So this is the hard thing about, the only thing Emily Dickinson and I are at odds that she hated cats, like is documented. And I have 5 cats. I have 3 cats in our recording studio and 2 cats in our house. So that just breaks my heart. But there's a lot of cats on the Dickinson property because her sister Lavinia adored cats. And I think so she had a lot. So I think that might be why Emily didn't like them, because of disputes between Carlo and the cats. Okay. And there's just so many of them. But, if I could change one thing about Emily Dickinson, not liking cats. Other than that, I'm cool with everything.
Yeah. And I have to say, I really like the dog in the book. I really enjoyed him.
Thank you so much. Yeah.
Big, huge dog.
He's a huge dog. And her dad got him for her because she was very small, and she would go off and wander in the woods in the village, Amherst, by herself, and it was for protection. So he lived 16 years, and shortly after he died is when she started to pull back. So people think that's one of the things that may have triggered her to be a recluse. So
interesting.
Animals are important.
So one of the things I want to talk about, we'll start with Jennifer for this, because you're writing historical mysteries. How do you find the balance for what people's conceptions of a historical time versus how things really are. For instance, I was reading a historical mystery that I will not name fairly recently, and they used the term, completely pulled me right out, because I'm not going to be one of those persons who email the author. They weren't using this phrase at that time period, but I cannot imagine that they were. And it was weird to me that like an editor or somebody would have said, maybe you shouldn't use this. So how do you balance whether it's the language of the time or how people conceive what women could do at the time? How do you balance that with the conceptions with the actual like history and documents of that?
Right. Yeah, it is true that a lot of things that people think are historically accurate are actually not. And I kind of encounter this. I write a lot of historical fiction. So I do 1880s London, I do Regency London, and I do an ancient Rome series as well. So, and especially in the ancient Rome series, there's a lot of things that people think were true, which are just from the movies. Sorry. But yeah, it takes a lot of research. And if something is like really different, and I can't think of any examples right now, but I'll put it in an author's note and say, yes, they actually did this. Also, when I write, I'm very conscious of what, get modern speech creeping into my books. And a lot of things we say now, people before 1980 did not say. Where a lot of the stuff that we use is very recent. But I do look up I use the Oxford English Dictionary. So if I'm the OED, so if I'm going, is this word, was it used? I can look it up and see when the first instance of it. And some of the words that we use are surprisingly old, from the 15 and 1600s. And of course, I can't think of any examples right now, but I just recently looked up a word. I said, nobody used that before the 20th century. And here it was used in 1600. So it's a really good resource, is the OED.
And how about you, Amanda, especially since you're writing Emily Dickinson, who, most people conceive she was a recluse. And so how do you balance, people's perception of her versus the reality of her?
Yeah, it's, even when I was studying Emily, like the first time I was exposed to her, I was like 15, a sophomore in high school, and I just fell in love with her poetry. But I remember being taught, like, she was this woman in white that didn't leave her bedroom and like wrote day and night. And that's not really the case. She started to pull away in her 30s during the Civil War time. So this is set, years before. And when I read biographies of her and I learned that, I just felt like it was something that people need to know about her, that she had a life, that, she had experiences that she could bring to her writing. But so I really researched her, and what was, fantastic is her papers are divided between Amherst College and Harvard because the family split it up. But now they used to like keep it from each other. Like there was a big fight, but now in modern, like 100 years later, they've brought them together, and it's pretty much all digitized. So like I have such wonderful access to like this, like her letters, like in her handwriting. Like, I can barely read it, but right next to it, they have like it typed out because her handwriting was terrible. I mean, my handwriting was terrible too, but I'm like, plus it was 19th century handwriting, which it looks
right.
different. So I think just and then the reason I said it in 1855 in particular, because she did go to Washington, D.C. to see her father. And the fact that she traveled, and then later in the life, she traveled to Boston. Like she got around for a 19th century woman, really. So I wanted to show that, and show also what travel was like during that time. So I had to look up a lot of train stuff.
So let's talk a little bit more about the research process. Can you tell us, and how was it, obviously, because this one's historical and most of your other stuff's been contemporary, how was it, the research process, different for you?
it was quite a bit different because, the rest of my stuff is contemporary and I've written a ton of Amish. So what I've done there is pretty much, I live an hour from Amish country. I used to be a librarian in Amish country. I just get in my car and drive on down and go to shopkeepers and ask people questions, like kind of like an old fashioned newspaper person. But of course I couldn't do that. So I depended a lot on some great biographies. There's one biography in particular. I will put it on my Facebook page because I can't remember it, but it's called Made to Muse or something, about the people that worked for the Dickinson family. And that was super helpful. And then those primary documents that the libraries have digitized were so helpful because it helped me to understand a little bit how Emily's brain works and why she was such a curious person. So it makes sense to me that, if the opportunity showed up, she would try to solve a murder.
And how about you, Jennifer? How does your research process change for the different series and different historical time periods?
Well, the process itself doesn't really change. It's just the, types of things I'm looking up. But I try to use a lot of, primary sources, diaries, memoirs. And for one, in the Cat Holloway, I use Mrs. Beaton's housekeeping book that she wrote, that she compiled in the early, I think in the 1850s. I can't remember exactly. I think it was 1850s. And that book not only has recipes, but it also has like what you should have the maid do, what you should have the cook do, what the housekeeper should do, and how to clean things. And, it's just a huge, massive tome of, anything you need to know to be a successful lady of the house. This poor young woman, she died very soon after that book was out. She died in her, I think, very early 30s from childbirth, because that was a thing in the 19th century. So the primary sources are very, very good. I also, I go to London, like this picture here, this is one of mine. I took it when I was walking down the street. So I go to London when I can. It's a long way, so I don't always get there. And we've had problems traveling the last couple of years.
Yeah.
I love to research, and I will just, and it's amazing how many sources there are out there, both primary and secondary, and good biographies of people are very, help put the time period in context. So I love to do it, and it's hard to, stop.
That is hard.
So I hear a lot of people say that. So how do you decide when it's time? How do you decide when you think you have enough info to get started, and then to know, if I need something else, I can figure that out later? How do you know when that point is when you actually have to start sitting down and getting words on the page?
I think it's, for me, like, I get this itch to start. I love, as a librarian for so many years, I love research, but then there's like this itch, like that when you're so far into it, like, I just got to get this story down. So that is kind of, it's just like an internal feeling. And then I do constantly, especially with the word origin dictionary, like the OED, I am constantly hopping back. I'll write a sentence. I'm like, how many words in that sentence can I not use? That kind of thing.
Yeah. Well, for me, usually I get a really firm idea for the next story I want to write, and I start like writing that scene, and then I say, okay, I don't know this. I don't know that. Right now I am writing an ancient Rome mystery, and I have them in a popina, which is a little tavern where they serve food, playing some games. And because the Romans played games, board games, dice games constantly, and they gambled a lot. So I said, okay, I want them to play this game. And then I said, okay, well, I've got to put a bracket there and go research the game. So I do that a lot. And I, since I'm constantly researching the backgrounds and history of all these things, I can pull from that, but I also have to go and research really specific things and also refresh my memory, because I'm not going to remember everything about all the time periods again. So every book I'm constantly reading history books. It's great.
And so we were talking a little bit before we went live, Amanda, how you had been working on this or had the idea for this new book for so long. What was the thing that made you decide now is the time for you to try this historical Emily Dickinson novel?
Yeah, so the story is I was driving with my then boyfriend. We live in Ohio, and he's my husband now, to visit his family in Iowa. And I was just trying to think of a new mystery idea to pitch to my agent. And I had recently retired from being a librarian and gone full time as an author. And so I had more time to do something that would take more time, like a historical. And I've always kind of hinted in my books how much I love history. I wrote a living history museum series for Midnight Ink years and years ago. And there's a lot of my books, they are solving cold cases that, way in the past and things like that, because I just love it. So I was like, okay, I'm going to do historical. And I knew there was a bunch of series out there with Charlotte Bronte as the detective and Jane Austen as the detective. And I was like, oh, that's so smart. And I was like, Emily Dickinson too would be really cool. And then I realized no one had done Emily Dickinson, and I could not, I literally could not believe it. And my agent happened to call me while we were in the car, and I just and he's like, okay, let's do it. And here we are, this many years later with it coming out. So.
And so, Jennifer, on your end, what was the thing that made you decide it was time for the Cat series? Because you've done contemporary, you've done historical, you've done some shifter romances, you've done a lot of different subgenres. What made you decide that it was time for Cat?
Well, actually, that's interesting, because Cat Holloway started a long, long time ago. I had been writing the Regency mysteries, and actually I had started writing those mysteries for Berkeley, and then they did not do well, and they just kind of vanished. And at the time I said, well, what else could I do? And I got this idea for a cook in Victorian England. And so I actually started writing a story, and then I put it aside because my agent and editor, this is a long time ago, but they were saying that historical mystery is over. Do not write any more historical mysteries. We don't want them. So so my romance career started to take off. And so there was no reason not to write those. And then, later when self-publishing came along, I republished the Regency series myself and continued it. And now I'm on book 16, which is the one that just came out. And that has done really well for me under self-publishing. So I said, well, let me try this Cat series as well. Well, actually, what happened was our water heater in our garage broke and flooded the living room. And we had to get all of the flooring redone, because we couldn't match the flooring to the rest of the house. So we had to redo the whole house. Oh, wow. So I was cleaning out a closet to get, these things out, and I came across this story that had Cat Holloway in it. I started reading it, and I was like, I like this. So I finished it as a novella, and I actually self-published it. It's called A Soupçon of Poison. And it's kind of a prequel novella. And then my editor read it, and she said, I love this. Let's do the series. And I said, well, okay. So so now we have 6 books, and Soupçon of Poison is still out there. I've got it in a print anthology, so you can buy it in print, but also it's an ebook. And that's kind of how that went. And if my water heater hadn't broke and I hadn't remembered that story I wrote so long ago, I might not be here today.
That's a great story.
So let's talk a little bit. Is there a difference? We'll start with Jennifer. Is there a difference where you're doing a historical versus romantic suspense, or is there a difference in the editing process, or even your writing process for it, or does it still kind of flow the same way?
Most of my stories just kind of flow the same way, because whether I'm writing a romance or a mystery, I mean, I put different emphasis, of course, in the books. Like in the mystery, I'm very interested in the mystery and the plot, a lot of plot with character development and things, and relationships kind of are on the side. In romance, the relationship is the main plot. So, I'm more, but all of my romances, there's always a mystery in my romances. So while the two characters are, figuring out what their deal is, they're usually trying to solve a mystery, or in the paranormal series, the Shifters series, they're trying to, save the town, or beat off the enemy or something. It's a very fantasy. I love fantasy and high fantasy. So there's a lot of that in my Shifters stories. But mostly when I write it, I just think of a story and I just write it. And whether I emphasize the romance or emphasize the mystery is, depending on what series I'm writing.
Yeah. How about you, Amanda?
I think my answer is pretty much the same. The process is the same, except for, the intense research leading into the writing. The only difference is when I'm writing my cozies, humor is like what I'm really like going for. And so like sometimes when I'm writing, I'm like, oh, I need something ridiculous to happen right now. So let's have the pig, run through like, a vat of peanut butter or something like that. So I mean that doesn't really happen in my Emily Dickinson, which is a little more serious book. So when I get stuck there, I can't have just like a random ridiculous scene. I have to think of something more practical to happen.
Yeah. So because you both have written several series, when you were starting this one, Amanda, were you aware of this potentially being a series and where it might go in subsequent books?
Yeah, I mean, we pitched it as a series, and my hope is that we will eventually get up to the Civil War, because that is where she really pulls away. So I want to highlight those years leading up to, kind of in fiction, answer that question, like, why would that happen? What caused it? So that's what I hope. But, they only bought 2 so far. So hopefully it does good and we'll find out.
Yeah. And then, Jennifer, when you were doing your elevator pitch, you said that we find out a lot about Kat and her previous marriage and a lot of secrets. Was that stuff that you knew before you started working on this book, and were you just waiting for the right moment to reveal some of this stuff?
I knew a lot about it. I have to admit, I wasn't certain if I was going to like have her husband suddenly turn up alive, but I decided that kind of seemed a little bit cliche to me, because that happens a lot in mystery series. So I said, no, he's going to be dead. But there's going to be a little bit more intrigue surrounding his death. And I knew, about the wife, the real wife. So there's stuff I did know, and there's stuff that revealed itself to me as I was writing the book. So it was a great book to write, and I've been contracted for books 7 and 8. So
congratulations!
Thank you. And so I'm going to go more into the next one's going to be about the friend who is taking care of the daughter that she and her husband have a problem, and Kat is going to help them solve it. So I can bring even more of Kat's background and her friend's background, forward.
Awesome. I got a question from the crowd. Amanda, Patricia wants to know, are there any plans to have your Hallmark book made into a movie?
Oh, thank you for that question. I don't think so. So I had a book series with Hallmark, just 2 books, and the second one will come out in December. It's called Frozen Detective, but Dead End Detective, it had really bad timing when it came out. It came out during the pandemic, and they shut down the movies for Hallmark. And then when they restarted, they really like hit the Christmas heart, and it's not a Christmas book. So I think because of that, it was on the chopping block, and I have not heard of any plans of making the other one a movie. So maybe someday. I mean, that's always the dream.
How about you, Jennifer? Any interest in any of your series coming to screen?
Yeah, I actually got an option for the Cat Holloway series.
Ooh.
And they're, I believe, writing the scripts right now. And they're still trying to get it funded and everything. So it's not a done deal. It's not a, concrete, it's going to be a series, but there's a good potential for it to be. And the production company has stayed in touch with me pretty well and asked me a lot of questions and things. And so that's been optioned for about a year now. I just renewed it. So, we'll see. I'm really hopeful, but in television, I'd never take anything for granted. So maybe not.
And because you are both doing several different series that come out at the same time, you have your fingers in all kinds of different subgenres and stuff. Let's talk a little bit about just kind of your day-to-day writing schedule and how you keep up with having multiple books a year. Let's start with Jennifer. What's a writing day look like for you?
Yeah, I write between probably 4 to 6 books a year.
Wow.
Some of those are it might be like 4 books in a novella or something, but well, I kind of have a routine where I try to write one book at a time. Sometimes I've had to overlap, like I'll have one draft done and I'll have to be editing another one. But I try to do it one at a time, and it usually takes me about I would say 6 weeks to 2 months to draft a book. Sometimes 2 months to get the draft, and then the second draft, and then to the editor. So that process is, and I have a word count that I want to hit every day. I don't always hit it, but I try to hit that word count, and I do it every day. Except I've started now to take Sundays off, and I've found that really helps me. And then the editing process, I usually have to. I can't always write fresh stuff when I'm editing another book. I kind of have to put it aside and really kind of focus on the edits, because I do at least 4 passes of my books, a draft, a second draft. I go through it all again. When I get the edits back from the editor, I read the whole thing and make changes, and then I proofread. It's usually 4. Sometimes it's 5. I prefer 4 because I'm done with it after 4th pass. But that's what I do for every book. And sometimes those overlap a little bit, but I do prefer to focus on one thing at a time, because I write so many different kinds of books that I like to, really get into that one, Yeah.
And how about you, Amanda?
Yeah, my answer is Jennifer. Like, we're twins. It's very similar. I write about 4 to 6 books a year, and I don't like to head jump during the day. So, like, if I am drafting an Emily Dickinson book and I get edits back from Emily's with Berkeley, and I write a lot for Kensington. If I get something from Kensington, unless it's like a 911 emergency, I have to sleep on it before I can go jump into the world from like 1855 Amherst to like Ohio Amish country contemporary. It's just like, it's too much. Yeah. And I do a similar thing with my edits. I go through 4 or 5 drafts as well. And my answer is like almost identical to yours. So I knew that so well.
And Amanda, was there any talk about this book coming out, the Emily Dickinson book coming out under a pseudonym, or was it always going to be Amanda Flower?
They never asked, and we never suggested. So I had a pseudonym a long time ago. It ended in 2016 for the Amish Quilt Shop books. And it was really just it was a right for hire to get my foot in the door with Berkeley. And ever since then, my agent and I have been really adamant to, stay under one name. It can be difficult at times, but for publishers to accept that. But you put so much work into building this fan base, and then to start at zero again is just so disheartening. And I'm always going to write mysteries. So like, if they're mystery readers, you can follow me hopefully anywhere. But so yeah, hopefully Amanda Flower is here to stay.
And how about you, Jennifer? Can you talk a little bit about flipping between Jennifer Ashley and Ashley Gardner?
Yeah. Well, the reason I have pseudonyms is a long time ago. I got published in romance and mystery by two different publishers almost at the same time. And they were not happy. The one publisher was not happy for me to be Jennifer Ashley at another publisher because they were already building my name there. And also it was two different genres. One was romance, one was mystery. So I said, well, that makes sense. We have the mysteries as this person and the romance as this person. So I took Ashley Gardner. Now later, and so Jennifer Ashley was just the romance writer. Well, when my editor wanted to do this Cat Holloway series, she's the same editor that does my romances. She wanted to keep Jennifer Ashley because it's a fairly well-known name, and they felt that they would be able to sell it into the bookstores that easier than if my Ashley Gardner name, which was I hadn't traditionally published with that name for a long time. So Jennifer Ashley had more background. So they decided to do that but there's a little bit of romance in that mystery novel. So, and I found that my romance readers romance readers, you have to love them. They read anything and everything. They're much more likely you'll have romance readers cross into mystery than the other way around. So I have a lot of cross readership from my romances for this mystery series, which is really nice. And so Ashley Gardner, even though the books are very similar to the Ashley Gardner books, there we are. It just kind of, so most people know that I write under both names, so I don't really have a problem with it. But
all right. And so we're going to start with Amanda for this one. What is something that you've read recently that you've loved?
I recently read Anna Lee Huber's newest book, A Certain Darkness, I believe. And I really loved that. And it's a different time period than I write. It was after World War I in England. So it was really interesting. And it's like a spy novel. So really exciting too. So I recommend.
How about you, Jennifer?
Is it okay if it's not a mystery?
Oh, of course. Yeah.
I am reading currently. There's a series it's a science fiction series by Martha Wells. And it's the Murderbot series. And I just love this series. It's called Murderbot because it's about a guy we don't know if it's a guy or a man or a woman. We have no idea. And he or she is what's called a sec unit, a security unit. And they're kind of robotish, cross between a robot and a human kind of slave that is like a security guard. And this security guard breaks his programming and goes rogue. And it sounds really dark, but it's hilarious because he likes to watch. One of the things that he entertains himself with is soap operas. And so he calls them serials, and he will just watch these hours and hours, and you hear all this commentary about, well, the humans on this series did this, and I'm so mad that so-and-so isn't, is leaving this other person, I mean, it's hilarious. And I'm on book 3 now, and they're fairly short, but I'm trying to get this so I can see exactly what it is, but my reading app is not.
So all systems red is the first in the series. So I dropped the link. Yeah, we're really lucky. Martha lives about an hour and a half away from the store.
Oh, great.
So she's been signing with us since like the 80s, and we're so excited to see the way that these Murderbot books have just blown up for her.
Yeah, they're wonderful. She totally deserves all the recognition. And tell her to keep writing them.
Definitely. Yeah, I think she's starting a new, like maybe more epic fantasy series and still doing the Murderbot stuff too. So we're really excited to see what she's got. And I think that they're going back and actually re-releasing a lot of her earlier backlist titles that haven't been available too. So it's been really great to see people catch up with those. I know we don't actually have a virtual event set up with Annalie Huber this time. I've chatted with her a lot throughout. But you guys are doing an event with her tomorrow night with Poison Pen, right?
We are, yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Perfect. Okay. So I always feel guilty asking people what you've got coming out next, since you've both just released brand new books for us. But so Amanda, what do you have coming out next?
So my next book is called Honeymoons Can Be Hazardous, and it's an Amish matchmaking mystery, and it comes out in December. And after that, in February, I have In Farm's Way, which is a cherry orchard mystery, not Amish. So those are both my standard hilarious cozies. So that's what's next.
Perfect. And how about you, Jennifer?
Well, as I said today, the next Captain Lacey Regency mystery called Murder in the Eternal City is out. Next in, I believe, January is going to be my next Leonidas the Gladiator mystery. He's a gladiator who's been freed from the games, and he doesn't really know what to do with himself, so he starts solving mysteries, as you do.
Yeah.
And that's going to be called The Ring That Caesar Wore, and it's going to be out in January. And then I'm working on some more romances, and also the next Cat Holloway book 7, which I'm not sure when it's going to be out yet, but and that one is called Speculations in Sin. I'm not sure that title is set in stone yet, but that's what it's supposed to be.
Perfect. Let's talk about titles real quick. I meant to ask. So we'll start with Jennifer. So can you talk a little bit about the title convention for the series, and do you come up with the titles, or is it kind of title by committee once you turn it in?
Well, earlier in my career, I came up with all my titles, and I thought I did have some clever ones, and I was always very adamant about doing my own titles. When I got to this series, I was like, I have no idea what to call these. I was going to do, my first novella was called Soup Shauna Poison, and I was going to do something like Dollop of Death and, cooking, little titles. They did not want to do that. So I pouted for a while, and I said, okay, fine, let's come up. And so it was somebody in the sales department that came up with Death Below Stairs. And I was like, that's brilliant. So we did that. And then the second one, we wanted to have stairs in them. So I came up with Scandal Above Stairs. And so I've kind of come up with the rest of them, but a lot of times I'll turn in a title and they'll go, we don't like that. So I learned to make huge lists of titles so they can pick one out that I will be happy with. So Secret of Bow Lane was supposed to be called In the Shadow of Bow Bells, because Bow Bells is the church for the if you're born within hearing distance of Bow Bells, you are a true Cockney. And I wanted her to be a true Cockney, so I wanted to put in Bow Bells. But they were like, no one's going to understand that reference. So I came up with Secret of Bow Lane, and it's probably a better title anyway. So.
And how about you, Amanda, especially for the title for this new one?
Yeah, for the new one, I came up with the title. Well, Emily Dickinson came up with the first line of probably one of her most famous poems. Yeah. And they were really on board with it from the beginning. So the second book, which I actually turned in yesterday, is called I Heard a Fly Buzz When I Died, which is also another famous first line. So that's kind of what the format going forward. And luckily she has a lot of poems that start with I and death or died in it. So they go on and on for a very long time. For my Amish candy shop, the original title of the first book is called Assaulted Caramel, which led to like all this funny candy names like Marshmallow Malice, etc. But I called it The Last Chocolatier, and they were like, oh, that's horrible. So they set the format. Since then, I'm just like, okay, I need a candy and a kind of like malicious word or, murderous word. So I've thought of all the titles since, but they set the format.
Awesome. So I think that is going to do it for this evening. But to recap for anyone who might have joined us late, we've been chatting with Amanda Flower, whose new book, Because I Could Not Stop for Death, just came out today. And we've been chatting with Jennifer Ashley, whose most recent Below Stairs mystery, The Secret of Bow Lane, is out now. We have copies of both of them at Murder by the Book. If you missed any part of our chat once we're done, Facebook and YouTube will archive them so you can go back and rewatch. If you want to hear Amanda chat more about her cozy mystery series, we've we've got those up as well. I've got a cozy mystery playlist. Jennifer, it was so great to meet you. I'm so glad that we got to do this. And Amanda, it was great to see you again.
It's great to see you too. Thank you so much. And thank you, Jennifer, too.
Thank you.
You guys have a good night, and we'll see you soon.
All right.
All right.